May the words of my mouth, meditation of our heart be always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and Redeemer. Amen.
Amen.
Please be seated. So it's interesting. This is the suffering servant kind of archetype that Isaiah talks about. And Jesus is reiterating that, saying that the Son of Man is not coming to be some sort of ruler to lord it over them, but to serve. And if they want to be like him, they need to serve. Likewise, because James and John, I'm never really sure what they're on about here, asking to sit at his right hand and his left. I don't know if they understand what he's saying, if they misunderstand it, or if, like Thomas, when he says, let's go with him and die as well, maybe they're okay with what's going to happen. But at any rate, they're dismissed, and everybody else gets angry about it, and they're like, well, no, we want to be next to Jesus and all these things. And I think it's mainly because they're misunderstanding what he's talking about. That's why they're so surprised after the crucifixion and disappointed and things like that. And he ends with this, after the servant and the be slave of all, for the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. And that ransom language, I think, confuses people who think about the sacrificial nature of the crucifixion. Because sometimes you think of a ransom, okay, somebody's kidnapped and you pay them money and you get the person back. That's not quite how it works, though, and it's not quite what Jesus is talking about, particularly in the sacrificial view of the temple that we see here in 1 Peter, where you've been ransomed, again that word, from the futile ways inherited from your ancestors, not with perishable things like silver or gold, but with the precious blood of Christ, like that of the Lamb without defect or blemish. So this ransoming isn't just the fee that is paid to get somebody back, but it's actually the rescue itself. So you're being saved or rescued from something. Peter says, from the futile ways inherited from our ancestors, but more largely written, it's being ransomed from sin and condemnation. But this idea that we're ransomed by the precious blood of Christ, like the Lamb without defect or blemish. When we think of the sacrifices made in the temple, we understand, okay, they made sacrifices. They were lambs. The lambs had to be without defect or blemish. They had to be pure white. The heifers had to be pure red. I don't know if there were any restrictions on the doves and the pigeons and the birds that they sacrificed, but rams would equally be without blemish and be pure white. And when they were sacrificed, at least not on the Day of Atonement, they weren't sacrificed as a payment for sin. It wasn't like, I did you wrong, here's my sheep, forgive me. What they did is they sacrificed, and they actually took the blood of the sacrifice, these pure animals that were innocent and blameless, and they just spread it all over the walls of the temple. Yeah, it would have been a very smelly place. But the idea wasn't that the sins were being forgiven of the person. It was that the temple, and through the temple, the people of Israel and the world were being made an acceptable place that God could live. So it was the sanctification of that. It was like cleaning up before the neighbors come over or before somebody visits. It's how we polish and dust everything before Christmas when we're going to host a bunch of visitors, or all the work we put into it before the bishop's visit. But it was a matter of the temple being tainted because it was on earth. So the sin of the people, the sin of the world was somehow creeping into the temple and staining it. So through the blood of these animals, it was being made clean and acceptable. So if we're being made clean and acceptable through this ransom, it's not just forgiveness of sins, it's us being made an acceptable dwelling place for God. And so the world, as Jesus talks about the temple, no longer standing and you won't need to see it and all those things. The world, individual Christians, churches, our hearts, people are being made clean so that God may enter into it by his blood. When you actually look at the Day of Atonement and when they actually forgave sins, it was the scapegoat took on the sins, and people would be atoned at one moment. And that animal is the one that's not killed. They don't sacrifice that one. They put all the sins of the people on it. They send it out into the woods to live or die as God sees fit. So it's not actually in the crucifixion that sins are forgiven. That's what makes us, it cleans up. It makes the place ready for God, for the Spirit to come to us, particularly here we are in the shadow of Pentecost. It prepares the way for that. The forgiveness of sins, if we're looking at the temple ritual, is probably more in the ascension, when the sins are taken on and sent off into the wilderness. So when we think of words like ransom here, and the sacrifice and salvation and all these other things, we need to understand it in the context that they would have been speaking about. It's not just paying a fee. It's not ransom like in a kidnapping. It's not making good for the sins that we have. It's not just paying that price because we can't pay it. In Jesus' death, it was paid, and the sins were forgiven within the ascension. To God be all the glory, now and forever. Amen.
If this message raised questions or stirred something in you, I'd love for you to stay connected. So like, share, and subscribe. Now go in peace to love and serve the Lord, and I'll see you next time.